Okay, so today I'm going to quickly teach you about Audacity, and we'll learn some of the basics, and by the end of it, you should be able to make an audio podcast. So first thing you need to do is go to the Audacity website, which is up here, and you can pick your operating system out of Windows, Mac, and Linux. And once you've found that, just download the application. Okay, once it pops up, you just press Save File, and then once it's saved and downloaded, you can run it and work your way through the installation. Alright, so once you've downloaded and installed Audacity, you just need to run it, and then we'll get stuck into it. So this is the Audacity start screen, I guess. Now, Audacity is what we call a digital audio workstation, or a DAW. Now, any program that works with audio in this sense will pretty much be the same. So all your basic principles will be the same across the board. Now, the good thing about Audacity is it's free. It's pretty simple to use, and it's good to start in this kind of work. So it's a really good program to start you off in audio recording. Now, the first thing we need to do to record is create a new track. Now, you can go up here to Tracks, Add New, Audio Track. Now, one key thing about doing audio is that these shortcuts, these keyboard shortcuts, will absolutely save you. So I'm going to start today by pressing Control-Shift-N. Now, on Mac, Control is replaced by Command and Alt is replaced by Option. So whenever I say a command and I've said Alt or Control, you just need to swap those over for Mac. So something I should have mentioned before we made a new track was this section up here. Now, this is all to do with your input and output devices, so your speakers and your microphones. Now, generally, when Audacity starts, it'll set it up the best way for your system. Now, my system's got a different audio interface to most of you, so that's why it says multi-channel M audio. Now yours will probably say something like Realtek, or it might say Microsoft Sound Mapper and things like that. Now the only thing I would change is change stereo recording to mono recording. Now the reason for that is you're using one microphone, and that is one audio source, not two, so you don't get a left and a right sound, you just get one sound. So when we start recording, this is our audio track. Now there's some different things in this section over here, which we'll use later on, but they might be handy just to know about. So of course you go mute and solo. Now solo will only play that track, so if you end up with a lot of audio tracks and you want to hear what's just on one, solos are a really good way to do that. Now this little slider here is your gain or your volume, and a really handy trick, another keyboard trick. If you've moved it around and you want it back to 0, you hold down Control and click it, and that'll take it straight back to 0. Now this is a left and right slider or a pan. So again, same idea. You can push it either way. If you're not too sure and you want it back to 0, hold Control and click it. Now the first thing you need to do is rename your track. So let's call this Test 1. Okay, so now that your audio track's set up, the first thing we should do is save your project. So we'll go Save Project and put it somewhere where you know it's going to be. So let's call it podcast 1. Now if we have a look at that directory, here's our podcast data and there's our podcast file. Now a good trick is to put all of this into a folder. So here's my Audacity folder, and that way all my projects will live in this folder and they'll all be contained and I can find anything if I need to. So we'll go back to Audacity. To start recording, you can press the record button, but the only issue I've had with this is that every time you press it, it makes a new track. So a solution to that is, instead of pressing this record button, you hold Shift and then you press record, which the shortcut is R. And you can see it there. If that pop-up comes back, that there's it in brackets, it's R. So append recording, that's what we want to do. So we'll click on our track and press Shift and R, and our track starts recording. Now you can see the sound waves jumping up and down with my voice. When you're finished, hit space. So that's the easiest way to record. Now, like I said, when you press Shift Append, or Shift Record rather, you can hold it again, Shift Record, and you can insert audio on the same track. Now, like I said, if you press that record button up the top, it'll just keep making new tracks over and over again, which can get very messy. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add a second track. Now we'll do it the exact same way as we did before. So you press Control, Shift, N for a new track. I'm going to name it. We'll call it test 2. Now, a reason for doing this might be that you have 2 people talking. So you might want to keep each person's voice separated, so you can do some effects to them later, or you could add sound effects. So I'm just going to quickly do a test like I did before. So I'm going to press Shift R, and you can see I've moved. This is called a playhead. So the numbers along the top are seconds, and wherever I click is where it's currently selected. So I'm going to start recording just after I finished, and I'll press Shift R, and then when I'm ready, I can start talking, and it'll record on a separate track. So now that we've done that, you can see that we've got 2 tracks of audio recording, and we might talk about some of the different editing tools that we can use. So if we have a look up next to the record button, there's these 6 little squares with different symbols in them. Now these are your selection tools or your editing tools. Now I'll go through each of them really quickly just to give you an idea of what they do and their shortcuts. So for these tools, the shortcuts you're looking at are the the F keys from F1 through to F6, and they correspond to each box. So the first one at the top is F1, then F2, then F3, F4, F5, F6. So F1, which is what I'm selected on, is the select tool. So you can simply click and hold like you would in, say, Word or something like that. And this is just generally useful for highlighting the piece of audio that you want. So you could probably delete that block if you wanted, or you could do some effects over it. The second tool, this is an interesting tool. This is called an envelope. Now, envelope in audio has to do with changing the volume, I guess, of things. And you can do it with panning as well, but I'm not going to get into that. So what it looks like is you can see that there's the audio has been split up into 3 rectangles. Now, if I grab this and squish it, we can see that the audio shrinks. So if I pull it all the way down, and we'll go back and press play with the select tool, and I'll press play over here, and then when I'm ready, I can start talking, and it'll record on a separate track. Now that is much quieter than, say, this first track, and you can insert audio on this because the envelope tool has pulled the volume down. Now, if you click in the middle, you can change the envelope so that it you can make swells and lulls in the audio. So I'll quickly do that, and I'll show you what that sounds like. So as you can see, it looks pretty crazy, so it might be interesting. And then when I'm ready, I can start talking, and it'll record on a separate track. And you can see with that the audio kind of jumps up and down the level. And this is your metering up here. So I'll play it again so you can see it happen, and I won't talk this time. And then when I'm ready, I can start talking, and it'll record on a separate track. So it's a bit hard to tell, but you can see that it does change. Now, the next tool is a pencil tool. Now, the pencil tool probably isn't very useful for what you want to do, but I'll explain it really quickly anyway. So what the pencil tool does, if I zoom in, the only way it works is it redraws the audio in the sense, the way the computer sees it. So you can see each of these little dots is how the computer hears audio. Now the pencil changes where these dots are. So if you're really clever, I'm sure you could do some really interesting stuff, but I'm not. So it tends to just make a horrible hissing sound or a horrible beepy noise. Insert audio on the same track. Click. Now insert audio. So like I said, it doesn't achieve much for what we want to do, but it's useful to know. Next tool is magnifying glass. Magnifying glass is pretty self-explanatory. If you right click, you zoom in. If you left click, you zoom out. This tool, this is the time shift tool. Now this is a very, very useful tool. The reason it's very useful is when you click on an area of audio, you can move it. So I could grab this first part. I can't actually move it because it's in the way. But what we can do is move this, then move it down, and I can move this over here, and I can swap them over. Now that's very handy when you're editing. So if you've said something out of order, or you need to change the way that you've recorded your podcast, this is the best tool for that because you can just move things around. Another good tool to use in conjunction with this is the selection tool and another keyboard shortcut that I'll show you. So what we can do is we'll zoom in a little bit and just pretend we wanted this piece of audio somewhere else, say before it. But as you can see, if I use time stretch, it moves the whole block, not the piece I've got highlighted. So what we need to do is we need to cut that bit of audio. So I think if I press Control I, that cuts that piece of audio out. Now when I use the time stretch, I can move it. And it's taken it out of that other section of audio. So zoom out. So we can move all this audio out the way. And I can put it back to there. So again, it's handy for moving things around. Now, I'm almost certain in Audacity, the same kind of shortcuts apply in general. So if I press Control C, that should copy it. And if I press Control V, it'll paste it. Now, the same goes for Control X if I want to cut something. So that'll delete it. And then I'll paste it on this bottom track with Control V. Same thing. And deleting simple. You highlight and you press delete. Okay, so the last piece of audio recording that I want to teach you really quickly is I want to import a pre-done piece of sound. Okay, so the way that you will do that is you'll go to File, Import Audio. Now again, it's got a shortcut, so I'm going to use that, which is Control-Shift-I. Now, from here, all you need to do is find your file where it's stored on your computer. I'm going to use this song. So there you can see I've got a huge piece of audio, and this is a song, so it's a stereo channel. I'll just show you really quick. It's going to be pretty loud. So we can hear there that there's some sound playing. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just take a selection of it. So I'm going to cut big chunks out because I don't really want any more of it. So I'm selecting, and then I'm pressing Control I, which is cutting the audio up, and then I'm pressing delete. So there's a chunk of audio, which is going to sit behind our voice recordings, our podcasting. So if we play it all together, we should be able to get that record. And you can insert audio on the same track. Now, like I said, if you press that record button up the top, and then okay, so you could hear my voice speaking up here, and you could hear the song down here. So there's our 3 audio channels. We've got one voice dub, a second voice dub, and a music backing channel. Okay, so now that we've got our 3 channels all finished, we need to mix the audio together. Now the best way to do that in Audacity is you go to View and Mixer Board. Now here's all our volumes, these big faders, and here's our pans up here, these little ones. And you've still got mute and solid. So it's exactly the same interface as over here, but it's just a little easier to use, and this is how it works if you're using any other program. So I'll push these volumes back up to 0, or thereabouts, because that's our speaking. We pretty much want that to be the same. Now the music, we don't need to be very loud, so I pull that down a little bit, and we'll have a listen. Record, and you can insert audio on the same. So I think the music's probably still a little bit too loud. So while it's playing, I can start talking, and it'll record on a set. So I think it's too loud. I'm going to pull that down. Finished down with my voice. Okay, so let's rewind and listen again. Record, and you can insert audio on the same track. Now, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. The volume seems to work. My voice is quite clear in this recording up here. This one's a bit different because I messed around with the envelopes, but that's okay. So this one seems to gel quite nicely with the music. Now I'm going to cut this back just a little bit more because we don't need that much sound. And I'm also going to take the front off of all of these tracks. Okay, so that's made our whole recording a little bit smaller. Now the very last thing, I'm not going to show you how to do it, but I'm just going to let you know it exists, is you can click on a file and then you can go to Effect, and there's all of these different effects that we can use. Now, like I said, I don't have time to go through every single one, and they all do slightly different things, but they are there if you want to play with them. So feel free to record your voice and go through each of these and play with all the knobs and stuff. I'll show you quickly what they look like. This is a simple equalizer. We use that to change the sound a little bit. You can move it around, or you can do a graphic EQ, which does things like this. So all of these things will change the way your audio sounds. Now, we finished recording. Our podcast is done. It's not very meaningful, but it's finished. So our very last step, we need to save the project, just so in case we lose it, or in case anything silly happens to our computer. And the last thing we need to do is export. Now that's going to turn these two voice recordings and these two stereo, or this one stereo channel, so 2 pieces of audio, a left one at the top and a right one at the bottom. It's going to mix them all down into one file for us, which will just be a simple left and right channel. So we'll go to File, go to Export Audio. Again, there's a shortcut here, Control-Shift-E. And I'm going to put it somewhere. So I'm going to call it Podcast 1, leave it like that. Now, if you really want to, you can change these file formats around. I'd use WAV because WAV's pretty standard in audio recording and it can be turned into pretty much anything. Now, I've already named the track. I know where I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in Audacity, and I'll press save. And again, this is just warning us that our 4 channels of sound here are going to get turned down into 2, which is fine. This is metadata. So this is the metadata from the song that I used. So we don't need any of this. I can remove it all like this. In fact, I think I've pressed clear. There we go. So we don't need their metadata because it's not their song. It's part of a podcast now. So we'll press OK. And now if we have a look in that file, there's our podcast. So we can check it. Open it up. Record. And you can insert audio on the same track. Cool. So that's our podcast done. So we've turned all of that audio that we recorded over here. Sorry. All this audio is simply turned into this one file here. Now with that WAV file, you can do whatever you need to do with it. You can upload it to your podcasting website, or you could put it onto a CD, or load it onto your iPod, or anything you need to do it for. So I hope that helped, and that you've learnt something about Audacity and about audio recording in general, and how to create your first podcast.